18 of ECCP and then another 18 of Start College Now. They can mix and match however they want. As you can see here, we have no students who are close to that. We do have one student who had some previously earned 3 credits through ECCP and is now looking at another 3 through Start College Now. So yes, you are correct.
Okay. That was my only question.
All right. Steve?
No, I mean, we always like this program. It has a lot of pluses, but I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. Everybody wants to go into psychology. It's a but I am wondering, because it does cost us, $5,000, $6,000, and it's college accredited, so it's not just like some person can just teach it and we call it the same. But we do have some accredited classes. I can't remember what they're called.
Transcripted courses.
Transcripted. Is this something that, if we continue to see this pattern, that's something that we want to look into the psychology here? I just feel like if every year we've got a group of 10, 12 students that are leaving $5,000, that's maybe they're telling us that we could teach it.
I think that would be a good direction to go. I know, similar to what we talked about with the Dean of Students, psychology, the interest in psychology and some of the behavioral sciences and understanding the self have certainly grown this year, and I think both our counselors would attest to that. I think what it comes down to is licensing for this to be transcripted. We do need a teacher who has a master's level
in that area.
In that area.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. I love seeing kids go to this, and I just think it's something for us to think about down the road if we get somebody that's licensed in that area.
Thank you.
Pat?
Just want to make sure I'm looking at the math right, Mr. Figge. On the Start College Now, pretty clear with the 17 to 18 costs, 18 to 19, pretty clear. When we get down to the second table, am I reading this right, that this year's cost is $990, which all that math ties out, but then 18 to 19 was $802, and then last year we actually spent $3,700?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So a reduction this year in costs through that program.
Well, it's confusing because we're asking from what we're asking tonight is only $990.
Yep.
This is just a small sliver of that because it's only our kids who are doing it virtually. It's not our kids who would go to UW River Falls as our typical location. If you look at right under the total proposed cost, the previously approved fiscal courses for next year, you've already approved about $5,900. Okay. So actually what we're seeing is almost a doubling of what that program is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I made that more confusing than I probably should have.
I get it. That helps me. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Mr. Figge. If we're ready, we can take a motion here.
Sorry. I move to approve the opportunity for Prescott High School students to participate and complete the Start College Now and Early College Credit Program courses as proposed.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Figge. We'll move to item F, Wellness Committee Assessment and Review of Policy in consideration of accepting a new policy in August.
Sure. Josh, what I'm going to do is pull up the individuals that were on the team. So if you could just acknowledge the team, then there were 2 parts. There's a report card, there's a self-assessment, and then that will lead into a new policy. And he'll explain kind of that process, and our target is hopefully to have an updated policy before the school year begins, so we believe it'll be August, back on your desk. So I am projecting the committee that sat in, and Josh, thank you for being here to kind of speak for the committee tonight.
Absolutely. And thank you for the approval of the early college credit and Start College Now. We really do appreciate that. So that is our wellness committee. At the end of every 3 years, every wellness committee across the state of Wisconsin that's providing food service is required to do 2 things. The first one is a triennial assessment of your wellness policy, and embedded in that is an assessment of what an ideal policy would look like using kind of a standardized ideal report card, which is called the WellSat. So our committee has gotten together a few times over the past, I think it's about 2 months now, and taken a look at the policy that was created, I think actually 4 years ago now. I think with COVID, we missed our, what should have been our triennial assessment. And then we went through this triennial assessment. And so what we were able to find through this assessment is that we had the core areas that the WellSat lays down, and you can see them on your screen, the nutritional standards, wellness or nutrition education, physical education, and physical activity during the day, other wellness activities. And what you see, the components you see on there are the components of our policy broken down. And so the triennial assessment asks your wellness committee to put those in and then deem how well you followed through on those goals. At the same time, once you're done with that, it asks you to compare your policy to the WellSat report card. And the WellSat includes 67 essentially best practice policy items that range from the nutrition standards, physical education and activity, the wellness promotion and marketing, how well you implement, how well you evaluate these things. And what we were able to find is we had a fairly comprehensive policy. We scored an 86 out of 100 on that, but that our strength of policy components was lacking. We scored a 50. So essentially it means we covered our areas fairly well, but we were missing some really key components, or some of the components we had were not specific enough to meet what the ideal standard would be. And then at the end of that triennial assessment is really a narrative on how well we feel like we have implemented, evaluated, and taken steps toward our goals. I think one of the really great things that's come out of this is we've got a relatively new committee. So the committee that originally wrote this wellness policy, I think, has kind of dispersed, and our committee has now taken over these 4 years. And we recognize some of the really great strengths that our original policy had, and the strengths would be our nutrition program and food service. You know, Tina Stenruse created a really great program, and if you read through that assessment, you can see that they've met a lot of those standards. Our physical activity and physical education, but that we also had some areas where we felt like our policy and our follow-through as a wellness committee were areas of concern that we want to bridge with our next policy. So that would be nutrition education and how we take nutrition from just the lunchroom and extend it out to our students, to our staff, and to our community, which is part of the ideal policy that WellSat lays out. Other wellness activities, and then how we monitor our policy year by year. So we do have some next steps in place. We want to develop more regular wellness committee meetings. One of the things you'll see in our next policy is that we also have committed to developing building level wellness committees, and to have not only a district goal annually that would be specific to some of the things that we're seeing, maybe some concerning things or some initiatives that we're seeing in the district, but then that we would work together with both our district level team and our building level teams to bring those to the different sites in a developmentally appropriate way. So I'm excited to get started on this. I know the people on the committee really felt like we could take the great things that we had in place, but also add in a lot of things that we felt like would be good additions to the next iteration of the policy.
All right, Tanya.
I think this is, I think obviously our wellness policy is great. I can't remember how long ago that we really revamped it. I know you said 4 years, and it feels like it's even been longer. So I just had a couple questions about just generally, so when you are doing this rating, are you kind of rating it where we're at right now today, or kind of like an average of the last 3 or 4 years in this case? It's kind of, because COVID obviously puts a damper on this, but.
If you look at the triennial, it asks you to do 3 things. It's just in terms of how your policy is written, how well is it written? Does it cover things? It also asks you for the follow-through. How well are you following through with your policy? And then it also asks you, compared to the ideal, which is that WellSat, are you close or are you not close? So we took it as the last 3 years. I think we can put a little asterisk next to COVID because it did limit a lot of the things on here. But one of the things that we did note were the things that were in place, I think, at the very beginning. Those things were being carried out. We felt like as a committee and as subcommittees, there were some things that we could have done better following through.
And then I just had a couple questions on a couple ones that I pulled out, and mainly because they're ones that I have, an interest in. And one of them was withholding physical activity during the school day as a punishment is discouraged. We rated ourselves a 3, which tells me we're doing awesome with that. And if I understand that correctly, that means like kids are not losing recess time for behavior at elementary and intermediate school and stuff like that. They're still having access to
Correct.
activity.
Yeah, we've specifically set out that we would not use physical activity as a punishment.
Which I think is absolutely awesome. Our kids need that kind of movement throughout the day. And then I did have a question that says all district middle school students are required to take the equivalent of 1 academic semester of physical education per year. And that was a 1, so kind of the opposite. Was there barriers with that, or?
It's more, when you compare that to what the ideal is,
Yeah,
you're supposed to quantify time.
gotcha.
And so that's where we're losing, I guess, points, and our committee felt like we needed to be really honest to say, an academic semester, is that every day? Is that every other day? How much time is physical education? And if you look at the WellSat, they say you should lay out, is it 60 minutes daily for a semester? And so we felt like let's do an honest reflection so we know where to grow in the next iteration.
Great. And then it looks like nutrition education is just an area of growth for us, which I think is also exciting. But overall, I think especially when it comes to nutrition services and the meals that we're providing our kids and stuff like that, there's just some really good numbers and things to look at that we can be really excited about. And obviously we have some areas that we're identifying where to come back to, which is great too. So thanks for sharing.
Pat?
No, this is good stuff. I think, my only question, there's a lot of things on here, right? And as we all know with policy and rules, everything on here is a really, really good idea. It's also really, really hard to do everything. How's administrative, I think, splitting up maybe some of the doing, some of the verification. I know there's a couple spots in here, there's the, is Cassie going to be the designated, official oversight for policy? And maybe it already said it in the document, I missed it.
No, I think you're hitting it right on the head. And Marie Magnan, I think, was the champion of this policy and did a great job setting it into motion. And then I think when that transition took place, and COVID this past year, and Cassie coming into a new position, it's really tough to do all these things well, right? So that's one of the reasons why our committee almost right away, as we were midway through this, said we need to involve more people so that we can delegate some things, disperse some of the responsibility. These building level teams, every building's like its own little city, and so they're going to have different things that they can do to reach our goals. And then we also need to we need to set a goal a year. So instead of trying to do 22 different things okay, we want to do one thing really, really well and move forward.
Awesome, thank you.
Steve?
I still don't have any questions.
Vicki?
So, 2 of the things that that stuck out because they had zeros was in nutrition education and the wellness committee, and it sounds like you addressed those because those are the same things that you guys have found. So yeah, the spreading out into each building so that each building, is more responsible, I guess, and it's a lot easier to figure out and diagnose what you need to do. So it sounds like you guys have got this under control, and I think it's great too that we've got a lot of new people coming in after this policy has been put in, so a fresh look into a lot of this stuff I think is super helpful. So
Thank you.
it looks good.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And thanks to the committee that worked on that after a very long year. Truly appreciate that.
We'll take a motion.
I'll move to accept the Wellness Committee's report card and self-evaluation to meet the requirements of the triennial DPI wellness review process.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. It's on to information discussion. We're start with item A, discussing in-town busing.
Yes, I have met with Tim Runquist, who's our director for transportation over the last few months or last 6 weeks. We met earlier today. One of the things that we need to discuss as a board, obviously, is we kicked it off a little bit with that we're in the middle of a biennium budget, and so we're waiting for what the Joint Finance Committee does tomorrow, and then how that impacts some of the additional things that would even link to our referendum in February of 2022. That said, what I'm angling at is that we're looking for what additional information you may need in order to make a decision. I think from Tim's perspective and also from a parent's perspective, being able to make a final decision by July is going to be important so that he can create the routes, be able to communicate those routes out, and then make sure that we're able to time those routes to make sure that everybody's at school on time. Here are some of the challenges that we're faced with. The benefits of what we currently have done is, in response to COVID, we did have to reduce the number of routes in town from 4 to 2. It did allow us to put additional buses out into the country. It did allow us to reduce some of the time that students spent on the bus. It did allow us to de-densify. The buses say they can hold 71 students, but 71 students for an hour, having 3 to a seat can be difficult. So one of the benefits has been having another route out in the county has decreased the ridership per bus, maintaining the ridership but decreasing per bus. We also are being faced with the retirements of 2 individuals and an additional person who has is unable to work at this time, and then replacing our subs. So we know that we have 3 drivers that are required just to get us back to a full deck, and then we have to hire 2 additional for substitutes. As you drive on Highway 61, there are a couple outsourced bus companies, and you'll see that finding drivers has been difficult. It continues to be difficult, and there are many bonuses that are being given. So we're in a highly competitive market right now. Some of the pluses is that our bus drivers do not work 8 hours, so we have kind of that morning and afternoon route, and then they rotate who does the trips for athletics and extracurricular activities. So putting that together, it means that we will not have financial dollars or a budget to be able to kind of share with you. We won't have any additional information for you about finances. We do know that we have to secure 5 employees to be able to just run the routes that we currently have. In addition, we are not reimbursed from the state for transportation of the students that are in town. We are reimbursed. We do get reimbursement aid for busing students that are beyond our city limits. So at this time, Tim has looked at what some of our surrounding districts have done, and that's been provided. River Falls did reduce similar to what we did, and they're going to maintain that program or that busing transportation. That's what they're recommending for their school year in 21-22. Ellsworth made no changes. They have a little bit of a different demographic on where their schools are concentrated, and then also with the road that runs right through downtown. Baldwin did eliminate 45 stops. They're considering bringing back 10, but not all 45. St. Croix is doing something similar to Ellsworth, and you can see what we've done for Prescott. At this point, Tim has shared with me is that he has had only 1 direct inquiry about whether or not in-town buses would return. I know that we've had a couple emails between the elementary site, and I think I have as well, but it has not been a large request at this time from the community. So part of the reason that we're having this discussion tonight is to make our community aware that we are in the process of identifying whether or not we would extend busing or term busing back on. And it may be that due to COVID and parents may have been working from home at times that it was easier for them to transport. It's hard for us to kind of project that at this time. So it's kind of one of those things of Again, we won't have all the information we might need around finances. We do know that we have to hire additional drivers just to be at baseline for where we were last year. And we're wondering what, if any, additional information you might need from us in order to make a decision.
Pat, can I start with you?
Sure. I know we're not making a decision today. I think, me personally, busing availability for everybody is very important to me, I think. Especially our younger ages, I think it comes to student safety. It provides parents the flexibility they need to do what they gotta do to support their families. Busing to me is really important. With that being said, additional information is, we talk about the city bus routes and the country bus routes obviously taking longer, more mileage. Is there ways to do multiple routes in the city to reduce, same number of stops, reduce the number of buses maybe? So I'd be interested to see if there's any opportunity there. And then, is this something that's surveyable to the parents to find out what type of support or need or desire there is? And if so, I'd love to have that information.
Okay. Tanya?
Yeah, you brought up just not a ton of requests and stuff, and I know I've had some people ask about it and stuff, and I guess one of my concerns about not bringing it back is I very specifically remember voting to not have it and saying we will be bringing this back. And so I don't know why people would request it, because we already said we were bringing it back. And so that's a concern for me when we start to change that dialogue. And I think you would have more requests as soon as the conversation's out there that maybe it won't come back. And so that's one concern I have. I have, since I've been on the board, do think that we have an excess of busing, I'll say, because every student has access to a bus, even if they live a block or two away. So I would be a little bit interested in the Baldwin's option there, where they reduced some of those bus routes. Like, I get it, if you live a block or two away, that doesn't seem like we need to provide a bus for that, that's right there. But some of our kids, I think we looked at that map and it was like, 1.5 miles away in some situations. That is quite far, and it's quite far in the winter time. It's super far when it's dark out when you're walking to school, and even dark out sometimes when you're walking home. And so I worry about safety for some of those distances. So I guess I think what we would need more information on is, I'd love to hear from the community where they're at, because I don't think we've put that out there yet, that this is something we're talking about. I'd like to know how much money we saved by not offering bus routes this year. I'd be curious.
Yeah, and to that I can share, we didn't save money because we kept the same number of buses and employees. We just deployed it out into the country.
So it was, like you said, de-densified and reduced time.
Yep.
Was it, you brought up that it is non-reimbursable within, and just so everybody's clear on that, there are certain, the state requires us to provide busing for certain routes because of safety or distance, stuff like that. So was it reimbursed prior to this year, or is that a change in legislation that it's not going to be?
No, it's never been reimbursed, so it is something that, been a choice of the district to still provide it, but not being reimbursed.
Okay, perfect. So I guess, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to hear from the community. I think this is the first time we're putting out there. I'm interested in seeing if we can do something kind of like Baldwin, where it's a little bit of a modified, and be a little bit more smart about who needs busing and who doesn't. I do know that at least one daycare has kind of brought up concerns, right, too. And so it's not just, our kids walking, but we've provided a service for some of our, I would say, businesses in town prior that has changed too. So I think that's something to consider as well.
Thank you.
Safety's been brought up. Have we had any incidents of issues with safety with kids walking to school over the last year? Have there been any accidents, trips and falls, any of that kind of stuff? I don't need that today, but I'm just saying that's a question that I would like to understand a little bit more about. I think understanding, if we can survey parents, great. If we can't, what feedback have we had throughout the year? Emails, communication, whatever. We talk about community and I don't know how we'd ever gather this information, but I'm kind of curious if community members are like, hey, it's been great not having school buses go by twice a day. I don't know that would be a sentiment, but it's I'm kind of curious about that. Hiring a bus driver sounds like it could be a concern. So I really think we need to delve into what we can do to maintain, because we need basically the same number of bus drivers anyway.
But at minimum, yep.
Yeah, so I think that's something really we need to have in this conversation. And lastly, you know, if we did do something where some of the city could still walk within close proximity, consideration of sidewalks, and then maybe crossing guards, you know, paid, volunteer, whatever the case may be. I know there are some programs for retired folks that they can earn, I don't know if it's dollars or credits or what it is, but for volunteer hours and that sort of thing. So maybe some programs like that so that we can increase safety if kids are having to walk into the building, so.
Sure. Thank you.
Vicki?
So yeah, my first concern is the bus drivers. If we don't have bus drivers, you know, I don't know how we can operate at the capacity, the minimum capacity that we need to have. And Tom is right, we did say that this was a temporary change because of COVID to stop the in-town busing, reduce it down to what we did, because we needed to spread that out, the de-densified buses. So I guess one big question I have besides getting drivers hired is what I guess is the maximum number of kids that we could possibly put on a bus, and unfortunately I don't think we know the answer to that right now with all of the changes and things that are going on with COVID and vaccines and all of that sort of stuff. If we, transportation-wise, if we're able to maybe get more kids on a bus. So that's a question that I have. And then if we have to rearrange a couple of routes, like Baldwin did, to lose some of those stops that are maybe closer, or, you know, spread some other ones out, so maybe it is a few more blocks that parents maybe have to take their kids to a corner. If we can't get all 4 back, could we get a 3rd route? That sort of thing, if we could squeeze that in.
Sure. And I know that Tim has already started kind of mapping that out as one of the options he would be bringing to you in July.
Okay. But yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, and first and foremost, we need to get drivers hired, so I think we will have to do some looking at how we make that happen.
Hey, Mike, can I add one thing? I think for information to come back, I understand hiring drivers are hard. Hiring anybody right now is hard, but I guess until that becomes a massive problem, we can't let that be a barrier. So maybe some information that would be helpful is, what would it take to not make hiring drivers hard? You can use your imagination what that might be, but that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm on board with everything you guys have said. There's 2 things. So the hiring of bus drivers, I don't know if we can compare what other districts have, you know, from a pay perspective, seniority, whatever, however they divvy it out for some of those special routes and everything. I think that would be important to kind of understand where we're at compared to our neighbors. I think a deal breaker right now is the de-densification has to, I guess, cease. We have, in order, I don't think we want to go above what we were offering before COVID. So that would be the ceiling, is what we were doing before. But I think what we're saying is, let's look for ways to optimize, possibly in town routes, maybe expand the walking distance some, maybe not offer it for within a certain radius. I think those are good things to look at. But I agree. I think we need, in my opinion, I think we need to service in town to some extent. And I'll leave it at that. So I think that, does that give you enough?
That's what we needed, the direction and some of the information. And again, we'll do everything we can. Obviously, you know, it'll be a full court press. Tim was putting out signs, kind of like the graduation 2021. Now you see hiring bus drivers. And so we have a full court press on that. And then we'll come back with some options as well for what the routes would look like.
Yeah.
And I think we'll need to make that decision in July, just so that we can then, you know, make sure that both we have the routes, we know that we have the drivers, and communicate to families.
Yeah, and I would put an emphasis on what Tanya said with the in-town daycares, home daycares. How can we service them like we service the other daycare centers and make sure that they're getting opportunities for busing from their businesses as well? I think that's really important.
Sure.
Okay. That's it. We can move on to item B, COVID-19 update.
Yeah, was on a conference call today with regards to kind of legal issues that continue to play out, and it's an ever-changing world with COVID, and we've experienced that there's been a lot of sometimes difference of opinions across either CDC, the Department of Health, the interpretation of Pierce County. There's recently a Supreme Court ruling with regards to whether or not the county health departments can close schools. That did hinge, and I just want to make sure that people are aware, is that that was primarily with regards to private schools suing within the county, and it was whether or not it infringed on the right to practice religion. So that was one of the reasons that that ruling about whether or not the public health had the right to do what he or she did. In addition, there is some general clause about whether or not the whole county would, or if the public health individual would have the ability to do universal things. The reason I mention that is these are legal issues that will continue to change throughout the summer and probably be updated. It's not something that Prescott Public Schools is spending additional money or trying to run through the courts, but it will obviously impact our plans. A couple things though, and this does relate to the busing issue, is you start to get into quarantine questions as well as vaccinations. And so our last vaccination clinic was here on June 10th. Understanding that we'll continue to support, educate, and inform individuals that the vaccinations have been approved for individuals 12 and up, and that there will be clinics that are school-based in the fall. There are some promising studies with regards to even younger children. There are discussions, nothing that I think that we're bringing to the board about whether or not vaccinations for students would have to be mandated, kind of like MMR, but it is something that some districts and you'll see at the state probably kicked around. I think personally it's too soon to make that distinction, and we'll continue to follow the conversations. There has been some discussion about whether or not it's if workplace could also mandate vaccinations. It, again, has been an area that we're about 80% of our staff. We do have the right, and it's not an infringement on someone's privacy, to have that reported to us. So we will be identifying how many of our staff have been vaccinated. There are times where some of our students that might be immune suppressed may require that the staff we provide have been vaccinated. And so those will be interesting court cases that I'll be working with Mark Inouye, Student Services, to identify whether or not any of that would apply to us. So we obviously have a lot of things about COVID that are related to HR accommodations and reasonableness, and we will be coming back to you with that information in August. The best news, I think, is that at this time the rates are extremely low in Pierce County. I'm hoping that we can elevate the amount of vaccines within our community, because the more individuals in our community, the less chance of ongoing spread. And so to keep our doors open, and I think we were able to demonstrate that K-5, and I'm very hopeful, given that students now can be vaccinated, that middle school and high school will be not challenged with any pivots for the next school year. Any questions with regards to COVID or that information?
I'm just going to open it up.
No.
Anyone?
I don't know.
Okay. All right, let's move on. C, summer school update.
And Michael Kozmowski, who does many things, and one of his hats beyond teaching and learning is also running our summer school program. and he has a quick update for you.
Yep, just a quick one. I also was teaching kids earlier today how to spin a basketball on their fingers, so.
Good work.
But just wanted to say that summer school kicked off, really at the high school, kicked off that Monday after school got out. Speed and strength, we had some courses up there, geometry is being run, credit recovery, our technology and design, CNC CAD class is new, physical education. We got about 200 high schoolers that are participating in summer school and about 360 4K through 8. So just some photos, we have some Spanish that's going on, some fun in the sun yard games, obviously some art, we have some basketball games and activities are going on in the bottom right corner. And then we do have a unique partnership between our SRO, Chris Stewart, and our DARE officer, Chad Cranda. They are offering a course to middle school students and how the law impacts them. They have a full menu over the next 2 weeks of things that they'll be doing with them, and then sort of what's law enforcement's role in the community and how are they an asset to our community. So it's a great partnership to have with them, and I thank them for joining us for that. Again, some additional summer school programming. We had gotten several calls late in April after sign up for summer school had taken place, and then also in May. So we did open up a late registration last week for 24 hours, and we got 18 additional students that joined us for that. So it was a good opportunity for some of those families that had missed out or their plans pivoted, and they were able to join us. Swim lessons, one thing that we're still looking at enhancing is some optional enrichment beforehand. I sent a survey to the families that had registered for that, and we've got about half of the families that would be interested. So we're now looking at instructors, and again, that happens in July and August. So we're going to have summer school programming going on all summer long at all of our sites. And then just a big, at Prescott High School, I talked about this a little bit, driver's ed's in full swing, speed and strength. We've got some choir camps going on right now. We're going to have some band and choir going on later in the summer. But again, approximately 200 students. Some take multiple classes, but that's about our enrollment at the high school level. So it's really good. We're growing that program. And then just some special thank yous. It takes the whole village to get summer school off the ground. So fabulous teachers, aides. We have about 7 high school student helpers. Our custodial staff, Bob Feyereisen, Trish Ferreira, I just wanted to point out to them, organizing, getting the equipment up from the other buildings into the rooms. Tammy Murphy and her attention to detail and keeping me on task. Cassie Butler, Kathy Miller helping us out with the health services. Tim and his crew, again, getting the kids there safe before and after. And obviously the students and families for choosing to participate. So it's just a whole group effort, but it's a great program, and it's exciting to have the kids K-8 come through the building every day. So that's it.
Steve, any questions?
Well, I'm going to ask it because I'm curious, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one to want to know this. Our decision we made last week, any impact one way or another for enrollment, teachers?
Yep, not for teaching staff. No, the teaching staff stayed committed that they were going to be there for the students. For both sides, we had a number of families that dropped. I've had a few emails about the mask option in that decision. And like I told those same families when we had masks were in place, it's optional. Summer school is optional. Everyone gets choices. This is a choice that was made. You now can make a choice. So we had a few families that registered, and we had a few that did not. Overall, I'd say there really was it was kind of a wash of the number. So, okay. But it did open up that opportunity for some that otherwise we're not going to take advantage of it. But we are adding a little bit every day, mostly to that speed and strength class, where people are still trickling in and registering and joining that.
Thank you.
Vicki?
No question.
Tanya?
Steve asked it.
Pat? One question, I don't know if you know the answer to this right off the bat here, Michael, but like compared to pre-COVID summer school numbers, how do they look?
Low. Yep, I'd say across the district right now we're about 40%. Some of that is because the secondary is actually adding students, but typically we'd get about 60% of our K-5 students to participate, and we're probably down at like 35% this year. Okay. So
kind of expected.
Kind of expected. I think the big thing is, and I'm hearing from families, is they did not travel last year. They're traveling this year. They don't want to be stuck down during summer school. It just wasn't convenient for families this year. But a lot of them, we're joining next year. We've always done it. It's just
Okay.
we want a year off.
So we're
too.
hoping, we're anticipating a surge next year, hopefully.
Yep, especially with some of the new programming like the SRO officer, that one, I imagine right now we have 12 students in it. After that gets out, I know the kids are already talking about some of the things they're gonna be doing. They're gonna be going into a squad car out in the parking lot, but have that experience of what does it look like to pull someone over, and they're gonna pull over Officer Cranda. What's the experience of being pulled over? So now they're in the driver's seat, and what should you do as a driver when you do get pulled over? So some of those experiences, and they'll go over the equipment that's in the vehicle. So the kids that are in that class are really excited. I can just imagine that that's just gonna continue to grow.
All right.
So, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Michael.
Let's see, we're on D, and that is PSD maintenance update.
I'm just bringing up, I wanted to kind of share, time has always been, I think over the last 15 months, blurs, but a week ago, we were in a session with SDS Architects, with Baird Financial, and our project manager, Market and Johnson. And I just wanted to share a little bit of that update, give the board an opportunity to kind of, what were some of your key takeaways, and then some of the steps that are in process. Wanted to share with you kind of the slides that commingle what I think were kind of the major takeaways that we were trying to explain, and that we'll continue to kind of communicate out with our community. And that is, first and foremost, that we're looking at, and this was an example that Baird put together, but I think it resonates for us. It's a pyramid of the types of things that school districts, many school districts, and I shared with the board that there has been an increase of the number of school districts in Wisconsin that have had to go out for capital and operating levies. We've been very fortunate that the last time we've had to ask our community to support an operating levy was in 2016. And so it's been over 5 years since the last time the school district has had to ask the community to invest in our schools. And the investment that we've organized around for February 15th of 2022 is for voters to approve bond sales so that we can address the maintenance needs that go beyond an annual fiscal budget. And so we kind of talked a little bit about kind of just the aging out of our equipment or equipment that is starting to fail. So we talk a little bit about the boilers, obviously essential to make sure that we continue heating our buildings. We do have 3 older buildings where the roofs are beyond life expectancy at 2, and the 3rd building is soon to hit that time. We also are looking at pipes in the intermediate school that are starting to fail, and we'd like to try to remove those before they continue to break. So it's pipes and plumbing, some electrical work that also can provide some cost savings as we move towards LED or time sensors. And then the building envelope, and that's the tuck pointing or windows, and then HVAC systems. When we surveyed our community in the fall of 2021, we looked at the whole pyramid. And what we learned was that the community was willing to support funding of maintenance that kind of is that red line and above, and that it would take a little bit more information and time for them to wrap their head around and also identify if they would invest in some major remodels, additional classrooms. And again, this is more about facilities was a Baird example, or I think for Prescott might be even a placement of amenities. So when you think about that, we kind of broke it out as a board. We've been talking about that we have a 10-year plan around maintenance, but we also then have to start about what is the next decade, our long-term Prescott School District master plan. And so at this point, we're kind of talking about maintenance for the referendum in February are all the items above the red, and that there will be conversations and community meetings and partnership with regards to a long-term master plan. Examples of with the high school facility up here, with our track being resurfaced, it will have to be completely redone in 5 years. there may be conversations that the board would like to have, is whether or not the track that does not allow us to hold multiple meets for multiple teams should be located up here where we do have excess land. Again, that is phase 200 compared to where we are today. We did have Baird speak specifically about funding options. Obviously, you're well schooled on this, but I wanted to just kind of repeat for our community is that we are in the throes of an annual budget that's being developed for the next 2 years at the legislature level in Madison. There are 4 pillars that are being asked, and right now currently have not been part of the revenue limit, and that is adjusting for inflation. Making sure that special education is reimbursed based on the promise that the federal and state government had provided, increased money for mental health, and also for the mitigation of enrollment drop. You know that Prescott did drop in enrollment last year with regards to safety concerns or homeschooling. For the last 2 years, summer school, which is a key component both on extended learning and enhancement, but also is part of our full-time enrollment. So it is an important revenue driver for our annual budget. So those are 2 big question marks as we head into fall of 2021. Your fund balance is outstanding. Baird shared with you that we've gotten to a level of 35% of our operating. You saw the fiscal reports for today, and you see that we've only received about 60% of our revenue to date, and we only have 2 weeks left in the fiscal year. So you understand the importance of how a fund balance is really a cash flow issue. One of the wise decisions you made was creating that Fund 46 that funds our capital investments. It does allow us to be reimbursed 7 cents on the dollar as we use that. And then, but that required us to have a 10-year capital plan, and we're currently looking at that 5-year window. Borrowed funds, you have the ability to have voter approved, and you do have voter approved Fund 39. Getting a revenue limit of $1 million is something that is obviously an option for you, but obviously not sufficient for the work that we'll be doing. Wanted to kind of just share, we did talk about ESSER dollars earlier today. Those are, again, the federal funds of $2.3 billion that are sitting on the table. We can put some of that towards air handlers. We can put that towards making sure that our space or square footage that is currently not used for instruction is turned back on, which could be very beneficial for the intermediate school. One of the things that, just to make sure people understand, is that there are strings attached anytime you hit federal dollars. Federal laws apply, and so the prevailing wage, which hasn't been a big issue within Wisconsin, is part of the federal laws, and so any work that is $2,000 or more does fall under the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirement. Nothing that you have to worry about, but it's something that as we set up contracts will be something that we obviously will attend to, which then means we have lawyers involved and contracts that will be reviewed. So on the one-time funds, we do have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 that we're waiting on. I've mentioned to you that the Joint Finance Committee, we have 174 districts that are waiting for our allocation of the $141,000. That'll go towards some of the interventionists that we talked about that we've hired for learning work. ESSER 3, we are slated to receive $600,000. And that can go towards facilities, but it has not yet been released, and it will be dependent on what the Joint Finance Committee does. On the right-hand side, it's really the blue bars that we wanted to kind of point out. You can see that the fund balance has increased over 2016 to 2020, and the importance of that are twofold. It allows you as a board to have a Moody's rating of a AA3, which means that you are, it's basically your financial rating, which means you get the best interest rates when you go out for bonds. And bonds are at all-time low. Unfortunately, supply chain is that supplies now have gone up. So it's a challenge. Bear did share kind of this picture that I think is really helpful. We use it every September, and we'll continue to give additional input to our community and hope that we'll have options for our community that's been vetted through some stakeholder groups. On the left-hand side is the revenue limit. It has a red box around it because it can't change unless Madison changes it. It's a state legislative determined formula, and that is what is dictated to us. The only choice we have is to go to the right-hand side, which is voter-approved debt. Currently, we have $2.6 million that on an annual basis we're levying that so that we can pay our principal and interest on the loans that we've taken. And then community service is in the middle, and that covers our PCR and community ed. And at this time, as a board, you levy $150,000 to run those programs. It's unique for Prescott because we run the Parks and Rec and take care of the green space and all the programming, which is not typical for many of our other communities. The mill rate, which is something that is important for taxpayers because it's the amount of money that they pay on the equalized value of their home. This is the portion or the historic portion of what the district brings to the table. But there's only one wallet or one kitchen table or one checkbook that's being written from, and that means that there are career and tech ed or Chippewa Valley that does have taxes that come onto the homeowner as well as each city. So each municipality is on its own assessment rotation, and they report out based on the amount of value all the properties have. Prescott as a city also has TIF districts, which are tax increment districts to lure in businesses, which is good overall for our tax basis, but it only is helpful once those are sunset. So you can kind of see some of the things that are close to the high school here are thriving, but all of those taxes are going back to pay the city bonds, not going into lowering the overall mill rate for our community. So it is, we did invite the city council, the city manager and our treasurer, and really appreciate Beth Lansing for being present so that we can continue to make sure that the city and the school are talking off the same page and understanding how the levies impact our taxpayers. This is the overall historic rates, and you can see that they are at unbelievable rates. And so Baird talked about how they just closed for a recent bond sale under 2%. So part of this is that by having such low interest rates, it does allow us typically to do more projects than we might historically have done. Obviously, we're hoping that by the time voters approve the referendum and investment in our maintenance, that the supply chain and the prices for the supplies that we'll need will also have dropped, but that will come with time. So since that meeting, I've worked with Andrea Herzon. She has kind of updated this timeline on the project and referendum. You can see that we have a red box around June and July. Some of the takeaways that we agreed to is that we are tasking SDS and Market & Johnson to work solely on maintenance only and not the initial two pathways. So it goes back to that pyramid that we're looking at maintenance only items and to update the amount of money based on current costs, because the SDS report again was done in 2019, and so prices have shifted. And then it's also the amount of work that would be done or how we would package that. The goal is that we would then, in the month of August, as we start to ramp up for the school year, we would be identifying and putting out a notice of trying to recruit individuals that would sit as a facility advisory committee to be able to learn more about Finance 101, understand the status of our buildings, and to look at the equipment that's been identified as aged out or needing to be updated or preventative maintenance. That group would start to kind of be educated and meet in August and have presentations done by Market & Johnson and SDS so that they could vet out and maybe even come up with additional options or hybrids. And then we would obviously hit some of the other stakeholders at the end of August as staff come back and some of our other city communities are meeting. In September, obviously we have open houses. We have the annual meeting that does the budget, and we would like to be able to present at that time, as well as identifying with you as a board the different groups that already exist. So if you think about Kiwanis or the Chamber, our religious groups, our gathering space, we would like to identify those groups and also schedule times where we would be running these options by. And then the goal would be in October, the facility advisory group would be coming to you with SDS and our project manager, Market & Johnson, to provide you with some options so that you would understand kind of the time frame that we're looking at. I think one of the great comments that was made last week as we were sitting there is, you know, there's, regardless of the windshield, there are some additional projects that are coming up that are 5 years away. And so we approve this, if it gets approved in 2022, we can do some of the work in the summer of 22, but it will carry over into the year 2023. And then you still have things that might be coming due in 2024 and 2025. And so at some point you may have to say, do we want to take that? How big of a bite of the apple do you want to take? And so that is really going to be the nexus of your work in October and November. And then no later than December 7th, you actually have to pass 2 resolutions. One is just to reaffirm that you're going to vote on February 15th, and that you also will have to put the amount of money. You are limited to 2 questions per calendar year. And so that is something that we have to decide if we're only having 1 question or 2, and to be able to understand the ramifications of that. Due to weather, we don't want to push it to the last moment, so the agreement is that we would target December 2nd as your resolution meeting to kind of finalize that. And then between January and February, we'd be continuing to do the education campaign to make sure that people are informed, and that would be a whole nother group. Obviously, their planning would start probably in October. So that's kind of the recap of last week's meeting. I can't believe it's only been a week since we met, and then kind of the timeline and questions or takeaways that you had from last week's meeting.
Pat, I'm going to start down on your end. Is there any comments or takeaways from last week's meeting or anything that?
No, it was a great meeting. Rick did a nice job recapping it all. I think, you know, my big takeaway, and Dr. was just alluded to it, is we need to think about kind of the master plan, the priority of maintenance projects that could be coming up, and just, you know, be very, you know, open and honest about priorities that need to be set. I mean, that's really the biggest thing that I, you know, took away from that is we're going to be forced to look out further than the next 2 years.
Tanya?
Rick, thank you for the recap. I think one thing that is important for me to always remember, and just for the community to remember, is like slide 13 on here, which wasn't 13, there's a lot more, was that really this isn't, this projective timeline is not really where it all started, though, right? Like it doesn't bring up the stuff that we've been talking about in the previous timeline, and I think it's really important to remember that since at least 2019 we've been working with SDS to get to the point that we're at now. This is not anything new. To talk about an operating referendum is not something that just came up in the past couple months. We've been talking about this for years and years and kind of redefining it and kind of getting down to what we really need. And so I'm excited actually to be at this point where we're really being able to identify how to move forward with this. And then I'm also just really proud of us for our Fund 46. I think this is our first time that we're going to be able to really put that Fund 46 savings to use. I think we have a little over $400,000 in that account that we've been saving up. I can't remember when we created created that, but it's been 3-4 years now at this point, if I'm guessing. 4 years, I see. So it's been a really good savings for us, and I look forward to, okay, how can we use that in that investment that we've put in there? So I appreciate all this recap. There's a lot of work to come. If people are interested in joining us, we are ready to hear some thoughts on this. So thank you.
Vicki?
No, I mean, I don't think I have anything to add. I mean, I think Rick covered it all really well. But yeah, I guess we were looking at just a couple years of projects, but I think Pat's right. I think we may have to, with the help of the community, look at where we're headed, and with their help, hopefully we can get some good input and some direction to help us make decisions.
Steve, anything?
I don't have any questions on the presentation. I wish I could have been there last week, but I think the summary is very good. I just want to speak a little bit to the resolution, or excuse me, the referendum. You know, it's one of those things where we hear, you know, you sent out a survey last year, the survey said the community really wasn't in favor of a referendum. And then we make adjustments, and then the community, some people in the community will say, now you're trying to shove it down our throats, you're going to do it anyway. And I understand that sentiment. I just want to speak to that for a moment, because I think what we're really trying to do, and I know other people on this board have said this too, there's a want versus a need situation that we have to talk about. And what we're really trying to do is get down to the need. The price points in that survey were not, you know, the community couldn't accommodate that, and I understand that. So as we work with community members, as we get some of these other committees put together to work with the board and the district, I hope we can have that type of communication where we're not only sharing what our needs are and what we're trying to do with a referendum and why we need these certain things, but that we get that community input involved, but then there's community output from those people as well, so that they can share with their constituents while we share with ours the purpose and the needs and those types of things. I know not everyone listening to me is going to say, oh, okay, we're on board, that's great, we really believe what you're saying, but understand the efforts there. That's what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that people understand what the needs are. And, you know, we'll talk more about that through the next many months, of course, but again, I really want the community involvement. I want that input for some volunteers who want to be engaged, and not just looking at tax dollars, but looking at the needs of the district in conjunction with tax dollars, right? It's got to be a formula. It's got to be a mixture of what's good for the taxpayer, what's good for the students and the teachers and the district itself, and you know, just come to some compromise, if you will, that can be workable, yet keep our buildings maintained and the roof's not leaking at the elementary school. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarification question to Rick about something you said? Rick, if you go to slide 2, my understanding from the community survey, and to be, again, really transparent about this, we did a community survey. It's the biggest one we've ever done as a district. It had information, education, questions. We brought that back to the school board, and we had a conversation about it and shared all those results. My understanding was above the red line is what the community said in that survey that they supported, or would be able to support. And below that red line, they said, no, we're not there right now. And so what I really appreciate of where we're at right now, and I know you weren't there last week, was we're talking about what the community has told us. We did pivot, we did change, we did adjust, because we heard from the community that below the red line they weren't there yet. That's what we're looking at right now is, do we need to get there? Do we need to have conversations? But just to be clear, Rick, above that red line, the community already did share. We are there, we can get our heads around that, and we get that. Is that accurate?
I think that's fair, and I would say that I think, Steve, you crystallized it really well. It's the need for students and staff balanced with the tax impact. And so there is that kind of balance there, and I think that's what getting everybody involved and being able to come back to you with 3 options so that we can validate what's going to be accomplished, how long it's going to either delay future needs of repairs or cost savings that it may occur. So I think it's a both and I think that's an important message that we have to continue to share out with our community.
And Tanya, I think you make a really good point. I'm just not sure the community as a whole sees it that way. I don't think they're interpreting the survey results in the way you just described. So I just want to make sure we're really clear on our intent and the purposes for these dollars. That's, yeah, but good point, good point.
I'll just piggyback on one thing. I look back at what decisions we made, and I don't remember the exact month the decision was made to go to referendum in February of 2022. It was over a year ago, I believe. But there was, after the survey, we had a very tough decision to make on whether or not we should try to force something in the spring of 2021, knowing that it was a tough year with COVID, and we had received some results from a survey that we weren't sure how to unpack it. And I think the decision that we made to push out, actually take a risk, because we have real issues, real needs on this list that we would have liked to have addressed this summer, but we took a risk because we wanted to work and partner with the community, inform the community, get their input, and put together what makes sense for what to go after. We made a commitment to go to referendum in February of 2022. I think that was a big decision point that the board made, and it made a commitment, and it sent a message to the community. It says, hey, we're not going away. We have to come back here next year, but we need to better package it up and figure out and basically sharpen our pencils with the numbers that we're charging our project manager to kind of help us craft and figure out where that red line is on that pyramid there. So the board really took some very careful steps last year not to force something to the community that wasn't ready to be accepted. And we did it for this reason for this summer and the fall, so we could prepare ourselves and the community to partner with our community to get something on a ballot that we think will be supported. And this is why we're here today. And I really I think that needs to be hammered home. The meeting last week, there's so many good storylines to tell. Baird does a great job telling the successes financially that this district has been able to accomplish over the last 5 years, 10 years. We are in a very, very strong financial position, and I can't wait to tell that story to the community, because it's going to be a really huge, important for us, important for the community to understand that we've been very fiscally responsible. We've been watching our dollars, and we're doing a really good job, and the Moody's rating is proof. I had that question. Is a AA3, is that the highest rating you can get, or does it continue to just go up and up?
You can still go up.
You can still go up?
Yep.
Okay.
But we did change our station.
It is the highest rating we've ever had as a district. I'm confident of that. And just the financial stability that we are in puts us in a really strong position for bonds, to buy bonds. And that's a great success story. I can't wait for the community to hear that. So it does paint the picture and clear up any not factual information that might float around. I think that's going to be very important for us to get right, and something very easy to show to the community so they can understand it. I'm really excited about this. I'm so glad that we've turned the page. And now we're moving on to stuff that we should be talking about, which is this stuff right here. And our administrators can focus on being administrators and doing stuff that they're really good at. COVID I feel it's not behind us, but it's in the rearview mirror. It's getting further and further away, and I hope it continues to, because the stuff that we're working on right now as a board, this stuff matters, and the stuff the administrators are doing matters. And I'm really excited for this project to start, and I can't wait. I think we're right where we want to be, and it's still a short timeline, but we're gonna effort towards the finish line here. So thanks. Anything else from anyone? All right, I think there's one more item.
One more item. Thank you to the board for our community. Stay aware, and we'll continue to communicate out. Matt Smith on activities code.
Thanks for having me. Dr. Skuza, can you be the slide progression guy? I'll give you a head nod or secret handshake, wave.
Are we there? All right.
Perfect. Put together some slides, looking at our activities code, some revisions and updates just to stay current in terms of changes we may have had, and just more information we can put there in terms of clarity and whatnot. It's always a good thing. So looking at our biennial review of this, so every 2 years take a look at it. Put together a review committee and ran some of the changes by them, things to look at, got their input. It was some parents, some students, teachers, advisor, coaches, just a few sets of eyes on it to make sure that we're not missing anything and things that they can look at. So first reading here, just wanted to run some things by you, looking at changes, revisions, updates and whatnot, and get some input and go from there. So if you want to go to the next slide there, Rick.
Yep.
I guess any questions right now to start? So looking at some updates that are absolutes, the way it was worded before, it had just quarters in terms of grades for being eligible or whatnot. Our high school this school year operates on a trimester schedule, so we needed to adjust that for the high school from quarters to trimesters for that academic eligibility. Also, we added, or looking to add, statement of philosophy, just in terms of a little bit more clarity on what it means to be a student athlete and those responsibilities here in the Prescott School District. And then also we added the WA Code of Conduct language, just to put that there as a one-stop shop. So when you're looking at our code, when you're accessing that, you have that. And basically the WIA is our governing body. There are some things that they control that in order to play in their tournaments, be in their associations, we have to follow those rules and those guidelines under that umbrella. So just have that there for people maybe to help with some questions they may have, for some clarity there on some FAQs to take care of that. There's also some things we looked at in terms of, maybe our responsibilities as athletes. We have our 5 things kind of laid out. It's a broad brush, I guess you could say. Some things that we looked at and discussed is, do we be more specific? That being said, if you get specific, where do you draw the line? That could be a rabbit hole you could go down. Do you have 937 bullet points that here's the things you can or cannot do? I think a big part of it is we have our coaches. You're going to have your activities director, that decisions will have to be made sometimes that aren't always going to be popular. They'll be right though, and they'll be seen through in terms of what conduct looks like for athletes. And that can vary from district to district. And I sometimes hate to say, even consistency, it could be from year to year on some issues. Is there a backstory? What led up to this? But we can't compare ourselves always to other districts on, this student athlete in said district did this and didn't get suspended, or they did 1 game here, they got 2 games. We have to trust what we're doing and move forward with that. You're not always going to make everyone happy, but at the end, I think our true integrity will show in our character with what we're trying to do. But at times, there's going to be, you hate to say that gray area, but decisions will be made sometimes from that. We move forward based on what we need to do. So based on that, could we add responsibilities to that? Yes, but where do you draw the line ultimately? The ones that we have listed, I feel are significant, and they do hold the line in terms of what we're looking to do moving forward. But decisions will be made from time to time moving forward with that. Looking at other recommendations or revisions, just kind of clearing up some language, you could say, and then maybe looking at our appeal process also, what we want to do with that. In terms of violations when it comes to chemicals, the WA does say that student athletes do have to be chemical free. So looking at our code, just a way to clear it up a little bit, just to change it up a little bit. Ours currently says you have to violate a state or federal law, a state, local, or federal law, which that's not always the case. So looking at that for the revision highlighted in yellow, we're just going to put, instead of violating any state, local, or federal law, we're going to put is in found to be in possession of the following things, use or whatnot. It just clears it up. It clears it up. And one thing it could be, you could have, in the spring here, an 18-year-old who, yes, technically could go buy a vaping device and do that. By law, that's okay. But in terms of our code, it's not. and the integrity and the character we look to hold our student athletes to, so it would not be okay. So by changing that verbiage there is found to be in possession, use, or sale, that cleans that up, in my opinion, and makes it much more easier for us to uphold that. And then we added there, regardless of whether the student is with or without their parent or guardian, because in Wisconsin, you could enter a tavern, with your parent and have a beverage, an alcoholic beverages. Once again, that's not something we are condoning, nor we want to see our student athletes doing. So cleaning that up, I think it holds water a little bit better in terms of what people can understand and not understand. I guess any questions on that?
I think it's a lot more clear, Matt.
And then now looking at our appeal procedure. This is something that, I do talk to the Middle Border Conference ADs on this, what appeal procedures look like. This is our current appeal procedure. Appeals are one of those that you might go 5 years not having an appeal, and then next thing you know, you might have 3 in a year. They are a rarity talking to other ADs. They do come up though from time to time, and they do vary in terms of what their procedures are and what the situation may be. But that's our current code that we've had right now in terms of appeal procedures with that. And then looking at, here's where I need some feedback moving forward before we get to our second reading in July there, is looking at some options. Talking with other middle border ADs, it varies in terms of what they have, like I alluded to earlier. Many of them, though, just had one level of appeal. We currently have 2 levels of appeal. The first one would involve teachers, advisors, coaches, and the athlete and their parents, and they'd have a chance to appeal. And then if they're not happy with the outcome of that appeal, they can take it to the school board for an appeal. So that we have 2 layers of appeal there. Talking with other middle border ADs, there was one school that had a similar appeal procedure as us, and a majority of them had just 1 level of appeal. And of that majority, a majority of that had a school board representative on that appeal. And that also involved coaches, advisors, teachers, a different panel there for them as a committee to appeal to for the student athlete and the parents. So looking at kind of options to kind of lay out what we want to do moving forward. Option A would be a brand new appeal procedure, and that would be the one-stop shop there. You get one chance to appeal, and that would involve head coaches or advisors, some high school teachers or middle school teachers if it was a middle school situation, and then a school board representative. And the timeline would be the same in terms of how you could appeal and then the written correspondence there. But after A, that would be the end of it. That appeal procedure, that decision would be final. And then option B would be what ours is currently situated at, with it having teachers, coaches, advisors there, and then they do have that option, if not happy with that first appeal, to bring it to the school board for a second appeal. So that is where I guess looking for some guidance in terms of that. I don't think there's a bad option, but there might be a better option there, and that's what we're looking for.
How do you want to start? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I could be swayed either way, I think, tonight. Option A seems to me you already appealed. I don't know why we keep kicking the can down the road and keep appealing it, I guess is my general thought. So I also would just recommend that if there is a board member on that representing the board, that we're really strategic about who that is. I'll say for me, I have high school kids that are athletes. It wouldn't make sense for me to be on that board. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that we have to strategically think about, so that way it does stay non-biased and all that kind of stuff. So I guess, Matt, from your perspective, if you feel option A is supportive and you feel like, that's enough for you guys, I'm totally great with that. And if you felt like you needed somebody else behind you to kind of have that final, I would be fine with that as well.
Option A, the pros of it, in terms of timeliness, if you have someone who wants to appeal, a student athlete and a family that wants to appeal a decision that the activities director makes in the middle of a season, say we're in basketball season, the time frame, they could be missing 6, 7, 8 games through the appeal process, just trying to gather coaches, teachers to put together the initial appeal, and then say that goes through and they're not happy with the results there and they appeal again, and it goes to the school board, trying to get everyone on stage together and find a time frame that works I could see, and every situation is different, but I could see there being some frustrations based on that if the situation ends up like in the winter, or even in the fall. Say it's a volleyball player or a football player, they only have so many games, and it's getting drawn out over 2-3 weeks. There could be some frustrations, but the time frame and the availability of people is also there. You know, it's not just a click of the fingers and everyone's there. So that's one thing there in terms of a pro. If you go to option A, we set the one date that lines up, and the decision is made, and then you move forward. So that could be a pro. A con could be, though, like you said, it's a small town, and people know people, and whether there's frustrations involved with that, of a decision that's made. That's where I feel the decision of the committee, regardless if it's the A or B or both, there is confidential, and the family is just given it was voted down or your appeal was heard and approved. That way, the integrity of everyone is kept there.
One thing it does say in there is the appeal committee may be made up of head coaches, advisors, stuff like that, and I guess I would maybe somewhat limit that because of the kind of the crossover with our athletes and all that kind of stuff too, is be cautious of that ratio of teachers or people that don't know that student in that format.
Yeah, my approach was any of the coaches would not be involved with that student athlete directly.
If they coach them in any.
If they say they coached him in the fall, and then it was a winter violation, that fall head coach would not be involved with that process.
Okay. Yeah, and so that helps me understand that committee a little better too, which means that it sounds like it's not always the same committee.
No, it would vary.
Yeah, that's great.
It would vary, and that's where I talked to some schools that they will predetermine their committee,
Right.
kind of a rotating basis, or teachers or coaches that are comfortable doing it. To me, that's not fair because each situation is unique, and you want to make sure I'm not going to call it a trial, but the jury per se, you want to make sure it's people there that don't have a previous encounter that may be negative on either side.
Perfect. Yeah, those are my only thoughts and questions.
Pat?
Matt, this might not be super important, but one thing that's kind of propped up before, if we are making any changes, I wouldn't mind considering under the responsibilities, under the statement of philosophy, on item 3,
Yep.
maybe adding just the word responsibilities. And because the current code does talk about responsibilities, right? And if if you're found to be unbecoming because you're not following responsibilities, whatever. Probably not a huge deal, but if we have the opportunity to add that word, that might be good. I don't have a real strong opinion either on the appeal process, other than option A seems to make some sense just from an efficiency sake, but I don't feel real strongly either way on that one.
Vicki?
Yeah, I like the idea of a decreased timeline for the appeals, not only for the athlete, but also for the athlete's teammates. It makes a huge difference. And then when the board is hearing that appeal, we're going through and we're asking the same questions that you've already answered and have gone through with the team that's already listened to the first appeal. So that seems really redundant, and I think time could be better spent decreasing the number of times that information has to be shared and getting through it as quickly as possible for all parties involved.
Steve?
I'm thinking when you talk about appropriate school personnel, I understand your point, Matt, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just wondering if we could frame up a little more information about that. Is it going to be 5 people? Is it going to be 7? Maybe a little bit of language on why we don't have a set committee, so there's some detail in here so people don't have to ask that question. If we believe this revision is really strong, I would be fine with option A. However, the last time we had to do this review process, the board did make a decision to change the recommendation. But it wasn't based on the decision that administrators and that team made. It was based on our activities code not being clear. So if we feel like this is very clear, again, I'd be okay with option A, but I just wanted to remind everyone that we did make a change in the second review, in the second appeal, I should say. So that's just my point there.
And let me just use that as, to extend, I think, the balance of what's in front of you and maybe how to direct the rewrite for the second reading. And it really is number 6. If you want to retain number 6, that the school board will be the final decision maker, if it's been heard before and then it still could be appealed to the school board, number 6, legal counsel has suggested then you can't have a school board member earlier in the appeal process, right? So I just wanted to make sure that it, kind of goes back, you did make a revision, and so there was that second step. So I just want to, if number 6 is stricken, then I think we lean into A. If you could still do A and take off a school board member, but I just wanted to make sure you see how both of those are interactive.
Yeah. I like option A just from an efficiency standpoint, on behalf of the student and the parents as well. The school board representative, to me, it's nice because our job and the way this ends up turning out when we're actually in the appeals process is we're looking at the policy, we're looking at the code and trying to interpret the code. And I think that can carry into the school board member that is a part of any of these. Hopefully we don't have any, but if they're part of them, that's really what I think an advocate for how to interpret the code and really take that back to the school board. And if there's other changes that need to be made, we can do that. So I guess I would lean towards option A. I could go either way, but
I was going to add to your point, if you can. Speaking of interpretation, you could add some notes in here regarding the intent of what we're doing. And I don't know how detailed we might want to get, but there could be an intent statement to help clarify what this board was trying to do by putting this in place.
So when you say intent, like timelines, efficiency, impact?
Yeah, or just to say, hey, this is really, I want to be careful what I say because of recent experiences, but just, yeah, maybe just some clarity on the intent of really what we're trying to do.
Steve, you're saying like acknowledgement of there's gonna be gray area, right? There needs to be the intent of the policy and why there is no.
So Pat, thank you for helping frame that, yeah.
does that help, Matt?
Yeah.
Oops, a lot.
Okay.
You have any other questions, Matt, for the board?
No, appreciate your time. Thank you.
And so
All right.
this will be
Second
coming
reading
back.
in July. I'll clean some stuff up. Yeah, we'll bring it back in July. Go from there.
Fantastic.
Was that
Thank
be your last meeting
Wait a
with
minute.
us too?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. We got
Nice. So you're pretty
another
maybe get something passed, that's a big one.
You wear the tank top too, or?
With the tie. Can you grow a beard?
Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Let's do entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank